Hi, everybody. Marc Summers here, and welcome to Marc Summers Unwraps. Today, we have an old friend. His name is Robert Wuhl. You remember the show Arliss? He was the star of Arliss.
We never wrote for any, with rare exceptions. A friend of mine, we never wrote for any particular athlete.
We're going to talk about baseball.
When I was a kid, there was no Mets. I remember the Dodgers had left town, and so there's only the Yankees, and I'm right there in 1968, 59, 66. That's Maris and Mantle. I'm a Maris guy. I'm a huge Yankee fan. There was no Mets yet.
We're going to talk about Rodney Dangerfield.
I've worked some tough rooms. I worked Vinny's Boom Boom Room, yeah. On the menu, they had broken leg of lamb.
And then
what do you think?
And we're going to talk about the art of comedy. He's a unique, fascinating, funny man. So stay tuned and don't forget to like and subscribe to Marc Summers Unwraps. Well, laughing is about the best exercise you can have. It makes you feel good. All the endorphins explode. I've seen Chris Rock 3 times. I don't think I've ever laughed harder than when I've been to a Chris Rock performance. I saw Sebastian Maniscalco. I just saw Fluffy. And yeah, often there are belly laughs. I guess my grandkids make me laugh in that they say and do silly things. And they're sort of spur of the moment and have nothing to do with the question you asked, and it just tickles you. But you know who really makes me laugh? My dog, Charlie. Charlie is just adorable, and he's a spoiled puppy, as you can only imagine, and just wants to be rubbed and scratched. But I think I laugh every day because of my dog, and there's an endorsement to have a pet right there. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Marc Summers Unwraps. I have a guest on today who, I'm not going to say we're close friends, but I do this thing when I'm interested in a human. I find them on social media and get in touch with them, and 92% of them do respond to me. And that's what happened when I met Robert Wuhl. We went out to dinner for about 3 hours and talked comedy and talked sports. And when we were thinking about guests here, I said, for the love of God, why haven't I asked Robert? So he's here, and I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you.
How you been?
Yeah, I've been okay.
Good.
Plus I've lost about 20 pounds.
I was just going to say that to you. How did you do it?
Okay, a couple of things. One is diet, and I am diabetic. So I am legitimately on Mounjaro. No, Mounjaro. So, and
you're the only one.
Well, that's what I hear. But I'm legitimate, and it has helped me, and I changed, and I'm eating, you know what it does though, Mounjaro? In fact, I had to take it this morning. It kind of makes you sick to your stomach a little bit.
Does it really?
Well, it upsets you. By killing your appetite, you eat less. I mean, I'm not throwing up or anything like that. And it's gotten better over the 6 months, I guess now 7 months that I'm taking it. But, it kills your appetite. You just don't feel like eating. You feel shitty for a day or two.
So I was doing a deep dive on you the other day, as I always do with my guests. And when did you start doing stand-up?
I just got out of college. So it was about 77.
Okay, so I started in I became a regular at the store in 76. But you were a New York guy. When did you come to California?
I was brought up by Rodney Dangerfield. Rodney flew me, said, "You want to go to California with me?" Because the first jokes I sold were for Rodney. I just started. And
how much did he pay per joke?
$50.
He paid 50.
Yeah.
Because Joan used to pay like 10.
Well, it's Joan Rivers.
Yeah.
How'd
you meet Rodney?
I went to the Dangerfields, and I just talked to the maitre d', knocked on the, went up there and said, "I think I got some jokes for Rodney. I could tell him." And he said, "Wait here." And then he sent me down to the dressing room downstairs, and Rodney said, "Come on in." And he opened the door, and as is his wont, he's in a robe with nothing on underneath, and it's wide open. Rodney did that. I'm not the first person to tell this story. Rodney was known for this. He would just, his balls are hanging out and everything. This is Rodney. So I said, I'd like to try some jokes on you. And he goes, "Okay, kid, let me hear them." And I said, "Okay, I'm all right now, but last week I was in rough shape, A guy came up to me, he said, 'Loan me $5 till payday.' I said, 'When's payday?' He says, 'I don't know, you got the job.'" So he goes, "Okay, kid, the jokes are good, but don't do me."
Oh, did he really?
Yeah. And so I wrote jokes, and then I edited a lot. He said, "You're a great editor. You're a really good comic editor." Here's what Rodney would do back in the day when there was phone machines, answering machines.
Oh, yeah?
He would call me up, and the answering machine would pick up if I wasn't there, and he'd tell a joke, and then he'd pause for the laugh.
No.
Yes. Yes, he'd say something like, I'll tell you, I'm all right. I'll tell you, I've worked some tough rooms. You know, I worked Vinny's Boom Boom Room, yeah. On the menu, they had broken leg of lamb.
And then
okay, what do you think? He would actually pause for the laugh on a machine. Oh, I loved him. So he said he's doing a Tonight Show, and he goes, "You want to come out with me? I'll bring you out there." Sure, I'm going out with Rodney Dangerfield. And this is Rodney as this is just before Caddyshack, and he's exploding. You know, this is when Rodney's getting big. He had done Saturday Night Live, or just about to.
And Carson loved him when he came on the
well,
show.
why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I mean, he was prepared, and you got to do damage when you get out there. You got to do damage. And so he brought me out, and by doing so, he introduced me to Mitzi at the Comedy Store. So I was his guy. So I got a leg up, but I had a good act, you know. So
what did you talk about when you started stand-up?
Well,
because I was a David Brenner sort of observational thing.
I wasn't. I wasn't.
So what did you do?
I was Woody, Rodney. What did I talk? When you're trying to find yourself, first you're telling jokes. I was telling jokes. My first joke was, my name is Robert Wuhl. I'm originally from Union, New Jersey, but we have a summer home in Newark. You know, so that was a joke there, and I did jokes, and then I told stories. I'm always a storyteller, and then I eventually got to a very long story where I talked about a painting that my relationship with my father, and this painting story, which was about a painting that I took him to, and we had nothing in common except baseball, really. And I was a storyteller, and I don't know how to explain my act. I was a storyteller, but I did very well.
Who'd you start with?
Larry, Jerry, George Wallace, Barry Diamond, Bob Shaw,
Wow.
Keenan Waynes, Paul Reiser, Gilbert. I was in that group. Do
you stay in touch with those guys?
Oh, well, Gilbert be difficult.
Yeah.
But
funny man.
Jerry is Jerry, so he's in, but I'm not close with any of them, I don't think.
Really? No more?
No, but if one of them walked in right now, we'd be close, we'd be tight friends.
Right.
I mean, because you go through that together. When you go
there was a camaraderie back in the day.
When you go through the minor leagues together, you do that, and you had respect for each other. And I blew through there. I mean, I was out of there within a year, and I already had stuff going. So and then Rodney brought me out, and I came out to Los Angeles, and I got work right away, and I got a pilot deal right away, and then I got a lead in a movie right away, the Hollywood Nights. And
who else was in Hollywood Nights? That was
a great cast.
Yeah.
Oh, it was the first movie for me, Michelle Pfeiffer, Tony Danza, Stuart Pankin.
Amazing.
It wasn't Fran Drescher's first movie, but it was like her second or third or fourth. I'm leaving somebody out. Gaylord Sartain.
Gaylord, boy, there's a name I haven't heard in a long time.
Gaylord was a funny man. That's a funny man.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's a name
Gaylord
I haven't heard
was really
in a
funny.
long time.
Great funny
And then you
man.
were in Good Morning Vietnam.
Yeah, that's later. That's about at least 5 or 6 years. When I came, that's 79, and Good Morning Vietnam's not till about 86. I mean, I had a period there where I did not, I was working as a comic and as a writer, because what happened was I had auditioned for Airplane. They had me audition they came and saw my act, the Zucker Brothers, and I auditioned for Airplane, didn't get it, but they hired me, and I was one of the writers of Police Squad.
You were one of the writers?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I wrote Police Squad.
Unbelievable.
And I learned a lot. We were off the air, so that was a great experience, though. I learned a lot about show business, a lot about writing, a lot about television, so I did that. And then I did, I was keeping and then I got hired at Paramount to be a staff writer for the movie wing. Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was then at Paramount, on the suggestion of the Zucker brothers, hired me to write scripts. And then this was just during, and then everybody left. That's when the big exodus came with Barry Diller and Mike Eisner and Katzenberg. They all went to Disney or Fox. So I was part of that, but I was at Paramount, and we had this great writers' ring there, wing. It was myself. It was a guy named Eric Luke, who I forgot the name of the movie he wrote. Cashman and Cash and Epps were next door to me, and they wrote Top Gun. And there was Bill Lancaster, who had written the Bad News Bears, the original Bad News Bears. And then there was Lasker and Parks, who wrote War Games. We had some good people up there.
So what was the goal? You grew up in New Jersey.
Filmmaker.
Well, I'm sorry?
Being a filmmaker.
Being a filmmaker. That was okay. So it wasn't stand-up. So when you started as a kid, we're both the same age. You're a month older than me. It was the Ed Sullivan Show. It was Hollywood Palace. It was the Tonight Show. I would see Alan King, Jack Carter.
Great comic.
Exactly.
Alan King is so underappreciated.
I agree. And if you go online and see the Survived by His Wife.
Oh, it's
routine.
a great routine. Alan King was great. I didn't open for him. One time I was working at the Trump Plaza in Atlantic City. And I was doing the early show with, I think, Penn and Teller. And he was doing the late show, or maybe the Temptations, and he was doing the late show. So the dressing rooms would turn overs, but he'd always invite us in, and then he could just hold court for. He was. I love
old school guy, but fantastic.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to be those guys.
No, I didn't.
No, see, you didn't. So what was your influence?
Woody.
You wanted to be Woody.
I wanted to be Woody.
So
I
you
wanted
were
to
way
be,
ahead of your time.
I wanted to be. I mean, my idols. See, I see comedy different. I use stand up as a
vehicle.
Yeah. I mean, I looked at Woody, Mel, Paul Mazursky. They were all stand up comics.
Mazursky was a stand up.
Was a stand up comic.
I had no idea.
He did stand up comedy. I don't know. And those guys did. Who else am I leading? Albert. I was using that model as a Nichols and May. I was using they were the big, but I love, to me, comedy's different. I look at comedy as in a theatrical sense in that it's all drama. And under drama, you have the two masks of tragedy and comedy.
Mm-hmm.
So how you play it is what happens. I look at comedy slightly differently. So for example, my top 10, if I'm going to put my top comic artists, I'll put that there. I got Cary Grant in there, and
really? Because he could play comedy so well in the movies.
Yeah. I mean, he knew how to land. Remember,
I haven't thought about that.
I would put Cary Grant there. I mean, the great comic artists in that way. Not just of course, I love Jack Benny, and I love Burns, and I loved. You know who I don't love?
Who's that?
Lucy.
You never liked Lucy.
I didn't like her. I didn't say I didn't like her. I didn't love her.
Because?
I loved everybody else on the show, okay? But I always found her being...
Trying too hard?
No, I don't... No. She's great comic. She's a great... I didn't like the show. She had Lucille Ball. It's Lucille Ball. I always found the character, what a pain in the ass this woman is. I mean, she's fucking up his, excuse me, I mean, she's screwing up his work all the time.
Right.
She meddles in where she shouldn't belong. She gets him in trouble all the time. Yeah, at the end of the day, but it just wasn't my favorite. Now, I watched it.
Yeah,
I watched
but it was 1951, Yeah,
but so is the Benny Show, and so is Burns and Allen, and so is the one that really I loved, and I've had this discussion for years and years with George Wallace, is Amos and Andy. Amos and Andy, remember, I only knew the
brilliantly
TV.
Written.
Now, I only knew the TV show. And I understand, when the radio show, that was white guys doing it.
Right.
So, yeah, it's really offensive in that way. But the TV show, I was a kid. I was, 7, 8 years old.
I watched it religiously.
And it's so brilliant and so brilliantly cast. Yeah. And Tim Moore, who played the Kingfish, is one of the great comic. I mean, George Wallace and I would sit and watch episodes all the time. Keenan Wayne's too. We talk about this. And Eddie Murphy. I always thought Eddie Murphy should play Tim Moore. I've talked about this with him. It was brilliant. And see, the thing about the Amos and Andy was that everybody, it was like, now my father worked as I come from a family that owned a produce, fruit distributors. Did well. But he had my father started out, because his father was tough on him, he was delivering the trucks and loading the trucks and everything else. And all the guys, all the workers, they were black in Newark. It's Newark. So, and he would say, okay, stay with the guys. So I would be with them all the time. So it was like, this was, between them and Amos and Andy, it was fun.
You have a similar background. My dad had a grocery store. And everybody who worked for us was in a minority situation, and I would hang out with those folks, and it's all I knew.
Right. It changes your whole viewpoint.
It does.
And my high school was also integrated. Not a lot. I would say maybe 15, 20%, but it's still, I would hang, jokes. So and it's not for everybody, but for me, I was very fortunate in that sense. So that was a comedy.
You mentioned George Wallace. George Wallace is one of my favorite comics.
Most entertaining comic in the world.
He is. And I met him through, when I was starting, two people took me under their belt, Glenn Super and a guy by the name of Ellis Levinson. Sure. And I I was not very good, and I learned that quickly. When I'd go into the store and see Jay and Dave and Shanling and those folks, I knew I could never be up to that level. But I got to hang out with those people. And it's so funny. I hung out with George a lot. Fast forward the tape 20 years, he's playing Vegas. And I go to see him, and afterwards he's doing a meet and greet. And I go up to him, I said, George, how are you? He had no recollection who I was. He did one joke that I used to love where he used to say there was a train at the backyard of his house, and his mother would say, George, don't go by that train going to suck you off. And he used to say, come on, train. And I told him that joke, and he said, I never told that joke once in my life. He told it every night. I couldn't wait for him to tell the joke at the Improv. But his consistency, his continuity, his ability to just make everybody laugh at any time.
He is the most entertaining.
He is.
He's just incredibly entertaining. You know, yeah, I was very fortunate. I mean, I'm friendly with I'm friendly with all these guys.
Did you ever meet Woody?
A couple of times. I'll tell you a story. Woody lives near me, and I've met him a few times. Now, I've never. He listens. So I see him walking around. One time, he'd say, "You live on this block? This is a great block because I live on 81st Street there." But here's the story. Bobby Slayton's very tight with Woody.
Really?
Yeah, Bobby Slayton, who is, again, another comic I started with, who I love. Woody loves Bobby Slayton. Woody loves comics. So, I don't know, 5-10 years ago, Bobby says to me, Woody has these dinners every year or so where a friend of his gives him his apartment, and he gets a private chef over there, and he loves to have comics over. And he says, do you mind if I invite you over? I go, do I mind? I go, next time you have one, you invite me, brother.
Yeah.
So didn't happen. And then finally it happened. Bobby calls me one day. He says, Woody's having a dinner on Wednesday. Can you make it? I go, I'm in Los Angeles. I can't come. Believe me, I would do anything to come in this. He goes, that's okay. So I didn't get to go to the dinner. What I left out of this is the guy who owns the apartment, his friend, is Jeffrey Epstein.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And I would have been there. So there, but for the grace of God, go I. I mean, so there's an example of, I didn't know who that guy was. I never heard of the guy.
Right.
But it was his place. Woody used to fly on his plane. So, yeah. So, I mean, that would have been, you get, there, but for the grace of God.
Guilty by association.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, my God.
It would have been bad enough that I was with Woody.
Yeah.
To some people.
Right.
You know, I mean, Woody was the biggest influence, probably. Mel Brooks also an influence, but not as much as Woody.
And have you spent time with Mel?
No.
Never have.
No, I've met him a few times, but no. I haven't, I was friendly with Larry Gelbart, who was another huge influence to me, the great writer.
Yeah. MASH. And
I met Neil Simon a few times, and Neil Simon came up to me one time, and he was talking about Arliss and the TV show, and I had this polarizing TV show. People loved it or hated it, but and the critics would look down on the show, and other people would love it. And Neil Simon came up to me and said, "You're doing great work. That show's terrific." So I mean, when I hear Neil Simon say it, it has a lot more weight than Joe Blow critic.
It does. I was actually good friends with his brother Danny. When I was working on the Mac Davis show, he was head writer, and Danny lived his whole life under, being the brother of Neil. In fact, supposedly Neil's mom used to introduce Danny as, this is Neil's brother.
I heard that. That's a horrible.
And Danny told me that story. Yeah, sure. Yeah, and so, he always
And yet people in the business knew and revered Danny.
According to a lot of people, including Woody, Danny taught them how to write comedy.
Yeah, no, Danny Simon was...
He was brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, 150%. So you mentioned Arliss, which I was going to get to, but let's get to it earlier than I thought. You said some people didn't like the show?
Oh,
it was one of my favorite shows.
Oh man, critics would put it on its worst list. The Dick at the Entertainment Weekly would put it on his worst. I mean,
Why? It was on 6 years?
No, 8 years. 7 years, 80 episodes. Why? What I learned was there is a group of a bunch of people who hate sports, and they're offended by sports, and they're offended by yes, they're offended by athletes growing up, even growing up when the athletes in high school, and I was not a high school athlete. It's like they don't like the jocks. They don't. I mean, I get that, but they're offended by. They really hate them. And I learned this in a couple of ways. It never dawned on me what was his name? Hill. David Hill was the head of Fox Sports for many, many years. And he told me the same thing. He said, when the head of Fox News, or CBS News or something like that came up, they wouldn't consider him because he was sports. And I said, don't they realize that every technique, every technical advancement, everything they do basically stems from sports reporting technically? I go, look at Roone Arledge. He goes, Roone was a visionary. These guys aren't. But there was a group of people that hated it. And so maybe they were the guys who they took the bat and ball away from as kids. I don't know. But there was a big animosity. There was a group that just hated
I
the
didn't
show.
know. So let's take a step
Saturday
back.
Night Live would take shots at it all the time.
Really?
Yeah. They just didn't. And then on the other side, I get people like David Milch. David Milch would come up to me when we would share a editing post-production facility for doing the final sound, and he was doing, I guess, NYPD Blue then. It's before he moved over to HBO. No, wait a minute. What did he do in HBO? He did the great show. Well, he does not Westwood. What's it called? The Tombstone. But he was telling me, he goes, Robert, he came up and he said, I don't think people realize how you're helping change TV with the kind of storytelling you're doing and stuff like that, changing tones and I said,
You were way ahead of your time in so many ways.
Well, now I hear that a lot. I mean, because we were doing social issue stories.
Yes,
when
nobody was doing that.
Nobody was doing. We were doing stuff on gay athletes, on domestic abuse, on alcoholism, on.
And that was dangerous back in that
Well,
time.
I was HBO and I had carte blanche.
Right.
So that's Chris Albrecht gave me carte blanche. And now the episodes always had to be entertaining.
Right.
They always had to be funny and entertaining, but I would go with, I didn't care about, I did one about breast cancer where Andrea Markovici, a friend who's a great cabaret singer, she plays a girlfriend I used to have in college. And we run into each other again. And we go out and we start fooling around and we're in bed together and I start moving under the covers. I start moving down, right? And suddenly I freeze and go crazy. And you realize she's had breast cancer and she doesn't have a breast.
Oh.
And Arliss freaks out and walks out. And I said, at this moment, I'm the most hated man in America.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, subjects like that, we did Alzheimer's with Ed Asner.
Yeah.
Ed Asner played the announcer of the Dodgers who was beginning to suffer from Alzheimer's.
That was a great episode.
Oh, it's one of my favorites. One of my favorites. And Sean Penn's mother played his wife.
Oh, God, I don't remember that.
She was great. Yeah, that's one of my favorites. And the tears come down in that one. And
so let me step back. Growing up on the East Coast, you're probably a Yankees fan.
When I was a kid, there was no Mets. I remember the Dodgers had left town, and so there's only the Yankees, and I'm right there in 1968, 59, 66. That's Maris and Mantle.
Right.
I'm a Maris guy. I'm a huge Yankee fan. There was no Mets yet. So I'm a Yankee fan. And then I like the Mets too.
But you're a sports guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Arliss came from what?
Well, it's a world I knew something about. It actually started with Mike Tolan, the producer. He went to HBO in New York with David Picker, producer, and they wanted to do a Spinal Tap of Sports, they called it. And this is like 94. And they wanted to do what they called a Spinal Tap of Sports, and Bridget Potter, shuffled it off and said, well, let's throw it to the West Coast. And they went to Susie Fitzgerald, who was then like Chris wasn't in charge, Fuchs is in charge, but she was development person there. And she said, now they knew me over there. I'd done the young comedian special and I'd done work for HBO. So I was known there and I'd done a couple of movies at that point. And they said, they knew I was a sports fan. They said, see if you can get Robert involved as a writer. So he pitched it to me and I thought about it. I said, well, I don't want to do a Spinal Tap of Sports. I've seen that. The Muppets do that. I said, what I'll do, I'd like to write a 6-episode miniseries on sports told through the eyes of a self-aggrandizing sports agent. Now, no one had done anything like this before.
No, but let me stop you here. What I read in my research was you were doing an impersonation of Donald Trump. Is that true?
No.
I had read that.
No. I'll take. Now, let me go back. So anyway, so I go back to that's not true. He does figure in some way. what? Okay, so I said, I'll do a 6-episode miniseries and I'll write that. Okay, and we wrote it and we rewrote it and Michael Fuchs would not give me the go-ahead. And also, we realized then he gets fired finally and Chris Albrecht takes over. Now, Chris put me on stage. He was the manager of the Improv in New York. So he had put me on stage and he knew he could trust me. And he said, Robert, I don't know that much about sports, but this is funny. So then we realized business model-wise, it couldn't be a miniseries. It had to be a series. And this is coming right after, Shandling's still on the air with
Gary Shandling show?
Not Shandling.
Okay.
Larry Sanders.
Right.
Also, the reason Fuchs didn't want it on the air is I think, remember, HBO's first success as a show is First and 10. And he was embarrassed, I think, because it was all TNA and it was OJ, so he was embarrassed. But Fuchs gets fired and Chris gives me the okay after rewriting this thing forever. I actually quit at one point and came back. But the way I broke it down was I had just read, I said, let's talk, do this thing through the eyes of a sports agent, and I had just read The Art of the Deal, the Donald Trump.
Okay.
And I said to myself, I don't believe a goddamn word of this book. I think he is so full of shit in this book. I don't believe a word of it. But I've got an idea. If I can narrate and by this point they want me in the show. If I can narrate this and do a counterpoint with what I'm saying happened, and we show exactly what really happened, which is what I said, I'd like to know what this is. Right. Because I had already heard the stories when I worked in Atlantic City about how, by people who worked there, remember this is going back to 1995, about Trump not paying anybody. He never used to pay. That shop owners were getting 10 cents on the dollar, 50. So I knew all about this stuff. And so I said, okay, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to narrate it and tell you what a great guy I am and what a genius I am. And then we're going to see what an asshole I am, And then for when we had it was done as a book. It was, in the opening credits, it was Arliss, the art of the sports super agent.
Yep.
So, and the picture is me with a bat over my shoulder. And that was taken directly from, that was influenced directly from the cover of the book.
Yeah.
That's where that was influenced. And I totally had forgotten about this until about 2 years ago when they were going to stream Arliss, and I had to go back and clear music rights, and I had to change some stuff because I never did it back then. And I used to love music. And then I started, I go, I forgot about the book. I forgot about this. And this is before, this is 95. So, that's where that comes from.
Yeah, because I had read about that. Did you have trouble booking celebrities or sports stars? Because you had everybody on that show.
Well, it's funny. My dear friend Glenn Fry, may he rest in peace. He used to say, going with you because we used to go to sports events. He goes, going with you to a sports event is like hanging out with Springsteen at a rock concert. He said, because Arliss. And in the beginning, we had a break, because we never wrote for any, with rare exceptions. A friend of mine, we never wrote for any particular athlete. It was TBD, and a lot of that all depended on who was in town, who's available. You couldn't write for these guys. Plus, they were there for texture as far as I was concerned. Yeah. It wasn't like the Sanders show because they were actors he was dealing with. I wasn't dealing with actors. To me, they were strictly texture, but there was a nice element. And we did have everybody.
Yeah, Michael Jordan, for God's sake.
Well, Jordan we stole a shot of him in the opening credits. He really didn't help us, but he allowed us to do it. But that's because his agent, David Falk, was a huge fan of the show.
Oh, really?
In fact, when Jerry Maguire came out, which came out after we were on the air, people forget that. And I love Cameron. I've known Cameron. We used to play softball together. And that's 10 years before this. And when it came out, and I said, they go, what do you think? I go, there's more than one cop show. I think you could have more than one sports show here. So he wrote his whole thing about Jerry Maguire, about the movie, David Falk. And he said, and he poked holes in a lot. Now, I love Jerry Maguire because I think it's a great romantic comedy, and I love it, but he was, as an agent, he was a fireman reviewing fireman movies. So, it's like, it's not accurate. He went down the pole with his left hand instead of his right hand. Okay. But he said, first of all, the idea that Jerry Maguire writes this idea, this thing about this essay about this mission statement about we have to not worry less about money and worry more about. And he goes, and then they fire him because he said that. He goes, it's so ludicrous. If this guy's the number one earner at an agency,
he ain't going nowhere.
He could write the Communist Manifesto.
Yeah, he's still
and they
working.
wouldn't care,
Yeah.
you know? So, and then at the end of this whole article, he writes, if you really want to know what a sports agent's life is like, watch Arliss. And so he was great about that.
Did you have Kobe on when he was like...
Yeah, first thing he ever did.
Right, he was
First thing
17,
he
I think,
ever
right?
did. He had just signed a contract. He just came out of high school. And what happened was, it was our first year, I think. And what broke the ice was we had to have somebody, in their first show, I was negotiating with a football team owner. And somebody suggested, no, why don't we ask Jerry Jones? And I said, that's a good idea. Let's try it. What can he say? No. And Jerry said yes. And that opened the door.
I bet.
You know, so Jerry was great. You know, and this is, like I said, this is 96, 97.
But also fantasy time. You get to call all these guys who you
never called them. I meet them on the set.
Really?
Unless they were friends of mine.
But did you request for your...
certain people, but mostly, again, it was about who's available. There was a couple of guys who I was friendly with I could call. Costas, I've always been friends with beforehand. Roger Clemens and I have been friends for a very long time.
Really?
Barry Bonds and I were friends for Barry, and still are.
So the first time you met George Steinbrenner, tell me this story. You were at an Angels game?
Yeah, there's an article published today in the little essay I wrote it's in the Internet Baseball Writers Association of America. It's today, and I talk about this dream I had. But the first time I met him was at a Angel game. My manager used to be Gene Autry's business manager. And so we had a suite there. And by the way, that Seinfeld episode thing about wearing the wrong hat to an Angel game, that's 100% true.
Is it really?
That happened to me also, yeah. Because they gave me tickets and I wore.
So you came in wearing which hat?
I had a Yankee hat, but they weren't playing the Yankees.
Right.
It was just 100. We were playing Baltimore, but it was 100 degrees in Anaheim, so I had to put some hat on.
Right.
And I got a call the next day. Well, why were you wearing a Yankee hat? I go, what difference does it make? They weren't playing. And I got a call. I met Steinbrenner, and he came into George's suite, Gene Autry's suite, and we're watching a game, and I just remember the Yankees were losing this game. Steinbrenner wasn't happy, and then they do a rally in the ninth inning, and they loaded the bases with 2 outs, and Danny Tartabull came to the plate. Danny Tartabull just signed this huge contract for like $25-30 million back then, which was tops, and then George is nervous, and first of all, it's ball 1, bases are loaded, ball 2, ball 3, play, and George says, I make him take a strike. Okay, it's conservative, but okay, I can understand that. At ball 2, he makes him take a strike. And now it's ball 3. I go, oh, are you going to let him swing away? He goes, absolutely not. And I go, okay, it's conservative. You got the guy. And he goes, strike 1. He goes, I make him take again. And I scream out, what? And George stares and looks. I go, George, you just paid this guy $25 million
to hit the ball,
to be in this exact situation.
Absolutely.
You're going to take the bat. So you're going to take the bat out of his hand and give him one more strike? I go, that's what you put him there for. And he looked at me. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me, stared at me. And Tartabull lined out. And but that was the beginning of our friendship because I think he
probably admired you.
George did,
because nobody would stand up.
But George would, when people stood up to him, he would fire them and then rehire them. That's what he'd do. So, but then he became he would be on Arliss. He'd let me, sit in the suite. He gave me tickets to all the World Series games when I lived in New York.
Really?
I mean, during that whole great period, I was in the suite, and along with Donald Trump and Kissinger and Billy Crystal, it was great, and it was a terrific time. He was great to me. And I remember one time I came back from when they lost to the Angels. I was in Italy, and he wrote me a handwritten note afterwards saying, sorry we let you down. And I thought,
oh my.
What the hell is he talking about? Yeah. I go, sorry you let us down. Wow. It's like, what are you talking about?
Unbelievable.
He was great to me. So I wrote this piece today about meeting him and what I would say to him today, if I met him. And I said, okay. And he goes, well, should I sign Ohtani? Should I trade for Soto? I go, no, I wouldn't do any of that. I think the one thing that I would do for the Yankees, and I do truthfully believe this, if I could make any suggestion that would help the team more than anything else, relax your facial hair policy.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? The last team in Major League Baseball.
It's absurd.
No beards, no mustaches.
I said, this is a team that is so analytically bound.
Yeah.
I go, well, I'll tell you one analytic. In the last 20 years, there hasn't been a team that didn't win that didn't have facial hair.
Yeah.
I go, except the Yankees. I go, it is absurd. It's keeping players away. And of course, it's funny, the piece and everything else. But I say, that's what I would do. That's the most, relax your facial hair policy.
It's amazing that maintains after all these years.
I said, you can use it as a selling tool. I go, look at DJ, put a Van Dyke. I go, put a little beard on the LeMahieu. You could say, hey, look at DJ's Van Dyke. I'd say you could, I go, come on, fashion, I go, you can have L'Oreal, the official moisturizer of the Yankees. I said, hire a stylist coach. I go, it's absurd in this day and age.
I love sports announcers, and I'll tell you why. First time I did the Today Show, I got interviewed by Bryant Gumbel. Bryant Gumbel did such amazing research. He knew stuff about me that he shouldn't have known. And that's why the guys like him and Costas stand out to me, because they're broadcasters. But if you started your career in sports, if you're good, and the two people we just mentioned are probably the best, you had to do your homework. And then when you would watch Costas on the Olympics, it was unbelievable. Why is he not working so much anymore?
Bryant?
Yeah. No, not Bryant.
Bobby?
Costas, yeah.
Oh, that's by choice. That's totally by choice.
Really?
Yeah, he doesn't like football, so he gave up the NFL thing. He does the baseball network. He's very happy. He was doing an HBO thing for a while.
Which I loved.
Yeah.
I wish he would keep doing that.
It's funny you mentioned Bryant. I got a email about 2 weeks ago, and the person I used to work with at HBO writes, they go, Bryant's wrapping up the series.
He is?
Yeah, so after 29 years, or 29 years, I guess.
Wow.
Yeah. And, we asked for his last show, does he want, a couple of HBO peeps to say anything? And he goes, and the first one he mentioned was you.
Seriously?
I said, really? I don't know him that well. I don't know him that well. I mean, I've met him maybe I don't think a half a dozen times. So I did a little something. I don't know if they're going to use it or not.
My.
But I'm looking forward to it next month to see if they use it. Yeah, Bryant's great.
The thing that blew me away about Bryant was, so I did this interview. Fast forward the tape 3 years. I'm walking on the streets of New York, and he goes, Marc Summers, how are you? And the fact that he remembered who the hell I was mine. Yeah, he's a journalist. He was just absolutely amazing.
Well, you talked about, again, the show. I remember I mentioned Larry Gelbart and Neil Simon and David Milch. I'm at a Vanity Fair party for the Tribeca Film Festival many years ago, and Fran Lebowitz comes up to me, chain smoking. She goes, I hate sports, but I love your show. And I said, well, thank you. I go, but it's not about sports. It's about characters in the world of sports. That's something entirely different, as is real sports.
Right.
It's not about a big game or anything. It's about the characters in different places. And that's what fascinated me, was characters.
Boy, Bryant's going to stop and Costas stop. I mean, what am I going to watch? That's
Marc.
Yeah.
Bill Marc.
Yeah. Let's talk about relationships of people you worked with throughout the years. Tell me about your experience with Robin Williams.
Yeah, there's nobody like him. Robin was special.
Nicest guy.
Robin was not only the nicest guy, as great a comic, as genius comic, he was a great, better human being. I mean, Robin was, people don't know when Robin first broke, and this is the 80s, late 70s. Robin was already broke by the late 70s. Yeah, right.
Yeah, like
Mork
78 is when I
right, Mork, so, but he's a San Francisco comic.
Yep.
And when AIDS hits, it ain't hitting any place more than San Francisco. And unbeknownst to a lot of people, and I knew a few, and you probably know some comics too, Robin was paying for a lot of hospital bills and medicines and treatments for a lot of comics that we were working with. People don't know that.
Yeah, that's the stories you don't hear. George Miller, who I'm sure you knew.
Yeah. Dave
paid for everything.
Yeah.
When he was in the hospital. Over $1 million, I heard.
Yeah.
But it's sort of like the Sinatra thing. Sinatra helped a lot of people. He just didn't want anybody to know.
Yeah, no, not Robin either.
And Robin and Dave were very much the same. When God, who was the girl? There was when I used to call into for spots at the store, and I can't remember her name right now. When she got fired by Mitzi, the first phone call was from Dave saying, "What do you need? You want to come to work for me? What do you want to do?" It's a side of comics that you don't hear about too much. I didn't know Robin that well, but every moment I had with him was pretty special, and he was an amazing guy.
Oh yeah, I met him when he was before Mork went on the air, because he came to New York. and he worked in the Improv when I was there, and he would go on at midnight for 10 people and blow the room away.
Yeah.
It was nothing like it,
No.
Robin Williams. And so we knew each other, and we were in the clubs together and everything. And then he knew my writing because one or two of my scripts were offered to him from Paramount. And then I'm cast in Good Morning Vietnam, so we got to hang out in Thailand together for a while. So it was, and it was right after the Belushi thing. It was right after Belushi had OD'd, the book had come out, the Woodward book, Wired, and everything, and Robin was cleaned up at that point.
But supposedly he was with Belushi that night. When
Yeah,
it
he
happened.
was.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. No, he absolutely was. Him and De Niro. So Robin was special. Robin was special.
When you see the new comics today, I don't laugh at a lot of people. I went to see a one-man show Sunday with a young comic by the name of Alex Edelman.
I hear it's great.
It was unbelievable.
I've heard it's great. I was supposed to go, and I had 2 weeks ago, and I had food poisoning.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, he's a storyteller, right?
He's a story, and that's the thing that's fascinating. I kept hearing, I even heard, I think it was Steve Martin, Billy Crystal said, best one-man show ever. And I thought to myself, if these guys are saying that, it must be amazing. Yeah. So I went on Sunday, and 34-year-old brilliance came off of that stage. Yeah. Well-written, well-structured, amazingly performed. And it's all about, he tells an hour and 45-minute story about a Jewish guy going to a white supremacist meeting. That's what the whole thing's about. Now, he goes off on tangents
yeah, sure.
that are brilliant, but he gives me faith in the future. I mean, you did the Tonight Show, right?
I did.
How many times?
3 or 4. Not with Johnny.
Not with Johnny?
No.
Who'd you do it with?
I did it with Gary Shandling, and I did it twice with David Brenner.
But no Johnny?
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
That's Macaulay.
Yeah. Well,
that was Macaulay. Although Johnny was apparently was an Arliss fan because he wanted me to send him all the tapes.
Really?
Yeah, but I never did it with Johnny.
Did you ever meet Johnny?
You think I'd know this? Well, I went to the show a bunch of times, so probably did.
But wow, I
never had
do with him.
No.
What about Merv?
Loved Merv. Merv was great to me.
He loved comics.
Oh, Merv was much better with comics than Johnny was.
Yeah.
Loved Merv. Merv had me under contract for 2 or 3 years. I would be on every month for about a year.
I didn't know that. Merv
was great. Merv loved comics.
Yes.
Merv would step on you, but Merv would love comics. But that's okay. Merv, remember people, Steve Martin was on Merv until he became a big star. Then Johnny would have him on.
Really?
Sam Kinison would never be on until he became a big star. Then Johnny would have him on.
Huh.
Pryor would be on Merv all the time. Then Johnny had him on.
I remember him on Merv.
Yeah.
That's where I first remember when he did the afternoon show.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
He didn't like edgy comics much, Johnny, until they became big stars.
And then he wanted them.
Then, of course, he wanted them.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Did you ever do Douglas?
Yes. Yes. That was fine.
Like?
That was fine.
Fine.
That was fine. I mean, Merv, I was a kid, so, and they were all good to me. They were all fine to me. They were all nice. I always found that the green rooms in each of these shows, the food in the green room was in direct disproportionate to how big a show it was. If you remember, the Tonight Show had, Letterman had nothing. He had a cracker.
Seriously?
Yeah, Letterman had nothing. I did Letterman a half dozen times, but he had crackers. In fact, he made a joke about it the other night, about the green room when he was on with...
Colbert.
Yeah.
Yes.
He made a joke about that. Johnny's green room had next to nothing, some booze, but you'd go, when I did the Hollywood Squares, it was catered by Spago.
Yeah, it was unbelievable.
I mean, it was it was a direct disproportionate to how big the show was, I always felt.
Very interesting.
What'd you think of Letterman the other night?
On Colbert?
Yeah.
Disappointed.
How so?
Here's the problem. So everybody thinks he is what Johnny was, okay? Nobody will be what Johnny was, number one. Number two, they brought it up to be like the biggest thing in television in the last 20 years. Dave is Dave. You got to remember, I grew up in Indianapolis with Dave. Right. Okay, I've known him, I don't know how many
You know
years.
my friend Jimmy Edwards?
Jimmy Edwards, no.
Yeah, okay.
So Dave I've known when he used to do the 4-H show at midnight on WLWI, the ABC affiliate. And I can tell you endless stories about me and Dave. I don't know. This self-deprecating silliness, I'm tired of it. He always plays himself down, and I'm not a big thing. He is who he is, and everybody looks up to him. As I was driving in today to do the interview, I was listening to Conan, and they were always saying that, Dave is the new Johnny. Nobody's a new Johnny. Johnny was Johnny. And so, I don't know. What were your thoughts?
My thoughts was it was a little bit complex. I enjoyed it. With age, he's become a lot nicer.
Oh, hasn't he?
And a lot warmer.
I can tell you a story. I better tell you the story off camera.
Okay.
But yes, he has gotten a lot
nicer, a lot warmer. The most revealing thing I thought of the whole interview was when he asked to sit behind the desk.
Yes.
And he said,
I would never let anybody do this.
That is the most revealing thing.
100%.
And also when they came back from commercial and I saw him talking with Colbert, David never talked to anybody during a commercial.
No.
Never. So he's, look, he's Letterman. I mean, like you said, he's an icon. He was a lot. The other thing that I found interesting was times when he was making jokes, the audience wasn't getting him.
No.
You know, and I thought, there's a generational thing.
There is.
There's comedy's generational. I'm a big
how long Dave's been off the air.
Well, I think comedy's very generational. I mean, you try finding somebody of this generation who likes Woody Allen. You try finding somebody of this generation who, but this generation is different. I mean, each generation is different, but I mean.
But nobody knows who Jack Benny is anymore.
Nobody knows who Jack Benny. They don't know W.C. Fields.
No.
And now I didn't.
I never thought I would see.
But I wasn't of his generation.
See, that's the thing. I always tell this story. When I went to Graham Junior College in Boston, Massachusetts in 1971 to 73, I had never seen your show of shows, but I knew everything about it, okay? I knew who Sid Caesar was. I knew who Imogene Coca was. I knew who all those people were. For some reason now, I was in a meeting at NBC. Now it's probably 15 years ago. And I was sitting across from a fetus wearing a tie, and I brought up Johnny's name, and he said, I've heard of him.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, I never thought in my wildest dreams that I'd be at NBC and they would say, I've heard of him. Yeah. Okay. And I had another executive, I was talking about late night, and the executive said to me, yeah, we don't watch that crap.
Yeah, exactly.
And since Dave's gone off the air, I watch Kimmel. I like Jimmy.
I love Jim. I mean, I love them. I don't watch the shows all that much, but I like all of them.
He's a wonderful guy.
He's a great guy.
He's a fantastic guy.
Jimmy's great, and I like all of them. I like Colbert. I like Fallon. I just don't watch them much. I just don't. I mean, I miss Charlie Rose's show. That's what I used to. That's what I used to watch. You know, and they're all talented and they're all great.
But don't you think Fallon fawns too much? Come on.
I don't watch them.
Yeah.
Again, I like them, but I don't watch them. But as Lovitz pointed out the other day, John Lovitz, he went off the deep end the other way.
What did he do?
He didn't go off the deep end. He made a comment saying about all the difference about all the late night talk shows, they've become too politicized. And he's not wrong.
He's not wrong. Colbert especially.
Well, Colbert, Kimmel. He said the only one that's not is Fallon.
Yeah.
He goes, that at least is somewhat of a variety show. But I get that. So, but it's a different generation. I mean, my goddaughter, my millennial goddaughter, I talk about, I go, how great, the greatness of the millennials are this, I think. They have a great sense of purpose. They really do. They have a sense of wanting something more than just yourself. They have a sense of the greater good. What they don't have a great sense of is humor.
I agree. But I sound like a dinosaur when I say that.
Not in the sense that they can touch it, taste it, feel it, smell it, hear it. They don't have a sense of that in that somebody is making a joke. A joke.
You mentioned about your wife being ill. How's that affecting your life?
Well, two things. One is I'm there with her a lot because she needs caregiving. I'm not traveling as much as I'd like to because I love traveling. I go to London. I'm going to go to London again. I go to see shows. I'm a big theater person. I go see 4 or 5 shows. I'll see 6 shows in 4 days in London. And I'll do that again in May. It's been and plus, I'm not working as much now. I don't really care to work that much unless it's really a really interesting project.
Right.
So that's how that's.
Shouldn't they bring Arliss back now?
Okay. You're hitting a nerve here.
That's my job.
Yeah. We were always the stepchild at HBO.
Really?
Yeah.
But you get renewed all those years. How could you be the stepchild?
That was Albrecht. And our ratings.
Yeah. We
had great we went up in the ratings every single year, and no shows do that. No show, very little shows, very few shows.
Sure,
I don't think The Sopranos did that. Now Sopranos was a much bigger audience than ours. But we went up every year. Our last year was our highest rated, and and the shows got better every year. and our numbers got better. We were moved around all the time the first 3 or 4 years. Then Sex and the City came around, and they put us after Sex and the City, and that did well, except they were always they say they don't care about ratings, but they say, oh, you're losing 60% of the ratings here for Sex and the City.
They always care.
So, well, of course they do. But then I turned that into a positive because I said, okay, I got to hang on to as much of this audience as I can. So let's start gearing the stories towards Sandra Oh.
Boy, that was my next question.
I said, let's make her more as prominent as we can.
Yeah.
Because of her wardrobe. And then suddenly that's when Fran Lebowitz makes the comment. And then by the end, we were 73% male when the show started.
And then?
We were 53% women by the time the show ended.
Oh, she was fantastic.
Oh, she's a great actress.
Yes.
Great actress.
Love.
She was funny too. I mean, people didn't realize. I remember when casting was going on, and it was between her and another actress, Lauren Graham, another great actress.
Oh my, yeah.
Now nobody knew either of them back then, including me. And either one would have been terrific. And they said, well, who do you want, Robert? And I said, I'd go with Sandra. I go, because I think Lauren Graham is going to be great. I just think there's a wild card thing going on with Sandra where I don't know what I'm going to get. And I kind of like that. Also, to be perfectly honest, I said, I'm doing a show about athletes. I'm doing a show in a world of diversity. I want to have diversity in the cast.
It was the right choice.
Yeah, I said 100%. Between her and Michael Boatman and everybody else, I said, I want diversity. That was a conscious decision. I want diversity. I'm dealing with diversity. I have to have it. So, But based
on what's going on in the sports world today,
it's much bigger than it was.
Oh my God.
Much bigger. Now, what HBO, the HBO executives, at least not the ones, these aren't the same executives. They were always kind of embarrassed about Arliss, So we've brought it up time and time again, and the head of HBO, they won't give us the time of day. And they own it, and they won't give it back.
And they won't give it, because I was going to say, you coming out of retirement and saving an agency.
And plus, I'd have a younger cast.
Yes.
It's like, plus the storylines you could do now.
Oh, my God. When was the last time you talked to Mike Tolan?
A couple of months ago.
Oh, a couple of months ago.
But
they won't even give you the time of day.
No.
Wow.
Yeah.
And they won't give it away.
Yeah,
wow.
No. And in fact, it's funny because Mark Wahlberg is a friend, and he used to work out at the gym with me, and he said, Robert, what do you call it? Entourage is totally based on Arliss. It's totally, it's a guy and his friends. It's the same thing you had.
Yeah.
He goes, Arliss was the inspiration for that.
It's amazing.
So yeah, no, it's not that, I wouldn't do it. I'd love to do it. It's funny. They, people say, oh boy, that show is so ahead of its time. And I go, yeah, I hear that all the time. I wish more that I was of its time and had Seinfeld money though.
Yes. And by the way, if you wonder how much money Seinfeld has, just ask him. Yeah, as you nod your head. See, I don't care. But it's unbelievable. Yeah, Jerry used to fill in for me. I did Our Magazine's warm-ups. And on Friday afternoons, I had to go over and do soap. And Jerry used to fill in for me doing warm-ups on Our Magazine. So
I remember seeing Letterman do a warm-up.
He did Barney Miller. At one point, I was doing soap. To the right of me, Saget was doing Bosom Buddies. And to the left of me, Dave was doing Barney Miller.
I saw him do a show because he was managed by Rollins Jaffe and Steinberg. A Good Time Hal, I think it was. It was the one with Ted Bessel. It was on for like one season. I remember David Letterman was the warm-up.
I kind of remember that show. Ted
Good
Bessel,
Time Harry or something like that. Yeah,
and Dave was doing it on that. He hated doing it. It was unbelievable. At one point,
what did Dave like doing?
What's that?
What did they ever like doing?
No, nothing. But Buddy Morrow, who was the sweetest, loveliest man in the history of the world, came and saw me do the warm-up one night on soap, and he said, I'm going to bring Dave over here to show him how to do it. And I said, I'm begging you, don't do that. I mean, I knew Dave a long time at that point, and the last thing you want to do is have Dave come over and watch you do a warm-up, It's unbelievable. Amazing. Hey, this has been fantastic. Good catching up. We got to have dinner again soon. Before I say goodbye, normally we just kind of sign off, but just found out, I'm spreading the news. February 19th, I'm opening in New York, doing an off-Broadway show called The Life and Slimes of Marc Summers. You'll be able to go online and find out how to get tickets, and love to see you there. It's all about my life and how a guy from the Midwest gets into show business and many of the stories along the way. So I hope to see you there. Hey, thanks for listening, Marc Summers. See you next week on Marc Summers Unwraps. Take care. Marc Summers Unwraps is a production of Believe Limited, created by me, Marc Summers, and Jessica Richmond. Produced by Keith Korneluk and Jessica Richmond. Executive produced by Patrick James Lynch and Ryan Geelan. Post-production support from Joshua Sterling Bragg and Believe Limited. Don't forget to subscribe or follow the show on your favorite podcast player. And if you really love it, why don't you leave us a rating and a review? Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Marc Summers Unwraps.